Thanks, Brett. Thanks to the organizers for letting an interloper from the States come and present as part of this. So my name is Eric Bickel. I'm SECORE's Director of Technology and Implementation. And today I'm going to be talking about using practitioner networks to develop technology. Oh. There we go. So we were asked to share something personal kind of at the start of this. So I thought I'd share this. I grew up mostly on the interior of the United States, but my grandparents lived on the coast in the southeast portion. I spent a lot of my summers and a lot of my time out there, and that's where I developed this love for the ocean. This is where that passion developed in 12-year-old Eric standing there. And it is that passion that has kind of ended me up working here with SECORE International. And for those who aren't familiar with us, we're a nonprofit organization that's focused on developing technologies and tools and methodologies and training folks on how to use those for the scaling of coral restoration. We're about 16 people. This isn't quite all of us, but it's a good representation of who we are. We're pretty geographically distributed. We have a team in Germany, the United States, and field teams in Curacao and Mexico. And largely our work has centered in the Caribbean, focused on kind of larval propagation, sexual reproduction of corals. However, over the last several years, we've made some inroads to working in the Pacific and in several other places around the world. That includes having the opportunity to come out on several of the GBR expeditions with Ames to the Great Barrier Reef. This is from 2022 in the expedition out to the Wapabura country. And so lucky enough to do that and to be able to exchange some ideas and work with folks out here. Generally, when we talk about our program, we split ourselves into three areas. We have a research team, a technology team, and an implementation team that which is what we call the training and capacity building arm of what we do. And those three areas working together is our model for working towards kind of scaled restoration or enhancement. But I think for the purposes of this talk, what I want to do is look at it a little differently, where, from the start of our organization, the ecological research that we've done has led to the technology that we've developed. Those two programs working together led to the development of this implementation, this training capacity building program. Through that program, we developed this practitioner network of partners who are utilizing our technologies. But what we didn't quite anticipate was how big of the impact that practitioner network would then have back to those other two programs, to the research side of what we do and the technology development side of what we do. So this is what I'm going to spend the majority of my talk, talking about from here. And so it's a little more process than results, but I think it's important as a consideration for a model of doing this type of development. So when I talk about our implementation program, SECORE doesn't see ourselves as the appropriate implementers of enhancement or restoration. Rather, we see it as far more appropriate, ethical, and in the end sustainable to identify groups have the ability to put these tools into practice, to provide them with the training and the equipment to do so, and to then hand that program off for a sustainable program going forward. And we developed what we believe to be a pretty comprehensive program for doing that. The 5 years is kind of an estimate depending on where the group is, but that's largely the size and shape of our program. It's a little bit of a deeper look into that, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but just to say that there are more aspects to it than just the training of how to do the specific work. We spend a fair amount of time on sustainable fundraising, organizational development, things like that, as we build these groups to being able to set this up and carry it out entirely on their own. So that first 3 to 5 years is what we term kind of phase one, where the focus is on learning, equipping, fundraising, and handing that program off. The hope is that many of these groups will then move into what we're calling a phase two, where we are providing direction on how them to become the trainers and bringing other groups into this program and to focus on scaling. And that's how we take kind of this nucleus of investment and expand that impact out. This is what the current network of partners in the Caribbean looks like. So we're in 10 different countries here. The blue dots are our staff centers. The orange dots are those current implementation partners, and the green dots are those, we're calling them second generation sites here, but are those expansion sites that we are not the direct relation to. Those are sites that those groups have brought on underneath their umbrella. And so our relationship with them is tangential. And this is where we hope several of those groups kind of move towards. So what do these groups look like? Largely, they are small, 3 to 5 staff. They're almost entirely female-run, and they're mostly nonprofits. And there are certainly a lot of diversity kind of within context within these groups and type of groups they are, but they face a lot of the same challenges. So low infrastructure is one of the bigger ones. Very few of them have land-based facilities, and if they do have them, they're at kind of research experimental scale. There's limited capacity to kind of operate large land-based facilities, or there's certainly kind of recruitment limitations there in those places. And increasingly, in the Caribbean context, they're facing limited gamete supply. And that's for a number of reasons, but the stony coral tissue loss disease and the current bleaching is not the least of which, leading to those populations decline and thus limited gamete supply. I want to highlight one group in particular. It's the most mature group in our program. This is Fundamar in the Dominican Republic. They just made that transition from that phase 1 to phase 2. And this is kind of the model of what we hope a number of these groups are going to move towards as far as kind of building on those initial trials to keep growing. And you know, they are not happy with these numbers. They're still pushing on this, but this is still substantial growth in just the initial 5 years. What's not represented here is the quadrupling of their budget that they saw over this as they successfully fundraised, and also more than the quadrupling of their staff, going from 7 people to, during spawning events with seasonal staff, they have almost 40 now that are working within this group. So this is kind of the model, the big inspiration group, but there are several groups behind them that are kind of following in those footsteps. So when we talk about how, you know, working with these groups has kind of from the bottom up affected the way we look at technology development, it's adjusted our focus to some degree. And we work outside of these 3 areas, but a lot of what we've been focusing on is an entirely in situ process. Where can we move things to not relying on those land-based facilities? Certainly looking at where can we be the most gamete efficient, kind of in the realities of the current situation in the Caribbean. And looking at things that are transferable and adaptable. If we can't quickly and easily train folks on how to use them, they're not nearly as valuable. And if we can't adapt them to the context of those sites, similarly not as valuable. So a couple examples, I think many of you in the room have seen several of these, but we've developed these core rearing in situ basins that allow for the rearing and settlement process to be done entirely in situ. We've been working on developing mass collectors to allow for the utilization of the common nurseries, fragmentation nurseries around the Caribbean for kind of mass collection with relatively low numbers of staff to utilize those nurseries. And we've been working to develop a suite of seeding devices that can be adapted to the site and kind of chosen based on the type of habitat, the type of species folks are working with, the state of those reefs, and the local logistics available. So, you know, the advantages of this for technology development are because there's this large network, we're able to quickly get things into the hands of some of the practitioners and get that quick feedback and iteration into the program. Quick is in quotation marks because we're still talking about larval corals, so we're talking about, you know, a year plus if we're looking to get survivorship results, but in comparison to what it otherwise would be quick. There is quite a bit of diversity within these groups, so there are a number of perspectives, and a lot of ideas come from that, kind of from the ground up, and you know, this is a way that this could work, and kind of adding to our brainstorming and identifying those needs of what could be useful to practitioners. And we've also kind of created this growing market, and which allows us to have a bit more of a foot in kind of negotiating and buying power as a group. It's a big difference to go from buying 1,000 of something to 100,000 of something, and that gives us a lot more power in that realm. Similarly, there are advantages for the research side. The first of which being that you have an increased number of capable people that are in the water. Those groups are making observations, whether that's spawning observations or observations on kind of region-wide events or activities. And they represent a group that is able to do rapid response type work in the case of an event. And the recent example I want to highlight of that is kind of last year during the 2023 bleaching, and this is a manuscript that we have in review at the moment, so I'm not going to go too much into details, but just as an example. And you know, folks know this, so I'm not going to harp on it too much, and I think many of you have seen these degree heating week maps. Essentially, anything below 4, you wouldn't expect much bleaching. Between 4 and 8, you would start to see some large-scale bleaching and some mortality. Anything above 8, and you would expect mass mortality. This is 2022. This is 2023. And so unprecedented bleaching. Most of the Caribbean saw 16-plus degree heating weeks. And so this is kind of a really large experiment, if you want to look at it like that, of kind of what a large heating event might look like. And in October of last year, we started at some of our research sites and some of our partner sites to observe some resiliency and some differing response between those recruits that came from the assisted recruiting process and the wild populations. And so pretty quickly, within a month, we were able to get 5 different sites looking at 6 different species to go out and look at trying to quantify these observations to see if what the qualifying observations we were seeing were actually there. And again, there's a lot of nuance to this and there's a lot of context, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. This could be an entire talk unto itself. But we did see a pretty significant difference between those assisted recruits and those comparison populations. And so those are comparison populations between wild adults, parental adults, where we knew that in some of those locations, and fragments that were outplanted at those same sites. So, you know, the big question here is the mechanism, right? I think we were able to pretty squarely rule out genetic resistance in there. It seems to be size and age related, but the mechanism itself is something that requires further study, and I don't want to go too far into that now, but it is a good example of this network being able to contribute quickly to kind of the research side of things in the face of an event like this. So, looking at conclusions, some unexpected benefits of having this kind of practitioner network, and has significantly changed the way we look at technology development. And it really represents a test bed for kind of optimizing and developing technologies. And it's something we're looking to replicate in other areas, including us coming a little closer to the folks out here. We have some funding from the US government to start setting up the foundations of what would a network like this look like in the Pacific, starting with the US jurisdictions. So we're looking for opportunities to kind of build off this initial investment of some of this training we're doing this year, and hopefully this is something we're able to move to in the near future. Thank you to everyone. Without these folks, none of this would be possible, and if we have time for questions, I'm happy to take any. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. We do have time for questions. Does anyone have any? Well, we got one.
Hey, Eric, great presentation, thank you. I was interested in your phasing. You talk about building fundraising capacity with local partners, and was just interested to hear your reflections about, I guess, how much SECORE is doing that versus, I guess, in what ways you're supporting local partners to do that, what that looks like and what's worked.
Yeah, so the thing that we found that has been the most successful is that kind of proposal writing, or kind of reaching out to the local governments as a partnership. In most of those cases, SECORE is taking a secondary role in either writing supporting letters or being kind of a minor partner on those. But it's been quite successful for these strong local partners to have this international group with this larger network there to kind of be over the top of that, and it seems to add quite a bit of credibility to those proposals, and have been quite successful. And so a lot of those competitive grants proposals that we've been able to do together with them have been the way that that's gone. Yeah.
Well, any other questions? Thank you, Eric.
Thanks.
Amazing work. Incredible stuff.